There has been a new major development in the Harvard fake data scandal involving former professor of behavioral science Francesca Gino. As many of you will know, a few months ago I made a video introducing this case to you, where I talked about 3 of the 4 initial accusations made by the blog DataColada towards Francesca Gino. They accused her essentially of faking the data in her studies in order to produce results that were simply false. Now, since those accusations came out, Harvard did their own investigation corroborating the findings, and Francesca Gino was fired from Harvard and launched a lawsuit against Harvard and the guys at DataColada in order to sue them for defamation. But other than a few short LinkedIn posts, Francesca Gino has been pretty much silent over the last few months ever since these accusations came out. However, that's all changed now, because Francesca Gino has launched a brand new website defending her innocence in this case. So this is the website I'm talking about. It's called Francesca versus Harvard, and in this website there are several different pages. There's a page talking about how Harvard's policy into investigating her was unfair, how the investigation that they followed didn't even follow their own policy, and so that was unfair. And there's another page explaining why she decided to sue Harvard and, more importantly, DataColada. But in today's video, I just want to talk about this page, Innocence, because that's really what we care about, and what I want to see is what is the evidence that she's providing that she didn't commit this data fraud. And in a major twist of events, I actually think that Francesca Gino provides a pretty compelling argument as to why she's innocent, at least for this first accusation. So in this video, I want to give Francesca Gino's argument as to why she's innocent in this case so that you can get a more balanced understanding of what is really going on here. So hopefully this video can give you an alternative point of view to this very complicated case, something which I think is really important to get in order to avoid bias. But you know who doesn't often get alternative points of view? Students at Harvard University. Yep, as it turns out, Francesca Gino's former university, Harvard, was ranked as the worst university in America when it comes to free speech, which is a story you might have missed if you only consume left-leaning media. Now, the reason why I'm able to see the biased distribution of news coverage of this story is because I have the Vantage plan with the sponsor of today's video, Ground News. If you don't know, Ground News is a service founded by a former NASA engineer that gathers the world's media in one place. The way it works is that for any story that you want to learn about, Ground News will gather the world's media on that story and present the bias and factuality of that news in an explicit way. This is really useful because it allows you to see what the political leaning of the media you're reading is, as well as how factual that media tends to be and who funds it. What's more is that you know that you can trust the ratings that you see on Ground News because they don't decide them themselves. Instead, the bias rating that you see on Ground News is determined by 3 independent news monitoring organizations so that you know that the bias rating isn't biased in itself. One especially cool feature of Ground News is the My News Bias dashboard. What this does is it helps you keep an eye on your news diet, see how biased the news you tend to consume typically is, and it helps you see how your news reading habits have changed over time. I think this feature is really useful for helping us get out of the echo chambers that we can so typically get into when consuming news. Now, this feature is only available if you have the Vantage plan with Ground News, so if you want to get 30% off your Vantage plan, then make sure you use my link in the description, ground.news/Pete. Thank you, Ground News, for sponsoring today's video. Let's get back to the Francesca Gino case. So what I want to talk about in today's video is the evidence, particularly around her refutation to the first accusation that the DataColada guys made towards her. So before we get into Francesca Gino's refutation, let's just remind ourselves what the study was and what the accusations were. So this study was from 2012 and it was regarding the effect of honesty pledges, especially looking at the idea that putting an honesty pledge at the top of a form makes people more honest compared to putting an honesty pledge at the bottom of a form. And the way that this study worked was that students were brought into a lab to complete a series of math puzzles in 5 minutes. And for each one that they solved correctly, they would be paid $1. The manipulation in the study came in when the students were asked to report how many puzzles they got correct. This was because the way that they reported their score was by filling out this form. And basically the students were split into 3 different groups. One was the control, one was a group that had to sign their honesty pledge at the top of the form, and one was another group that had to sign their honesty pledge at the bottom of the form. And what the authors of this study, including Francesca Gino, were hypothesizing was that by putting an honesty pledge at the top of the form, people will be more honest when they fill out the rest of the form compared to when the honesty pledge is at the bottom. And well, that's exactly what the original authors of the study found. People who signed at the top of the form over-reported less compared to people who signed at the bottom of the form. And well, when it came to the guys at DataColada, they thought that this was frankly a load of nonsense. So what the 3 guys from DataColada did was look at the dataset that was listed on the Open Science Framework online, freely available for everyone to see, and they were looking for anomalies in the data that might hint at some sort of data manipulation, or in other words, faking data. And the accusation that they made against Gino in their blog essentially had 3 different parts to it. The first part involved flagging rows of data that seemed suspicious. In this particular instance, they were looking at the participant ID column, which is the unique ID given to every participant in the study. Because these IDs are supposed to be unique to every participant, that means that there should be no duplicate IDs in this entire column. And what's more, when you look at this data set, it appears to have been sorted by group first of all, and then in ascending order of participant ID. So DataColada were looking for participant IDs that deviated from this pattern, and they found a few. For example, this 49 right here was duplicated and they flagged those as suspicious data, and there were also several other rows that appeared to be out of order if the data was supposed to be sorted in ascending order going down. But the real kicker came when you plotted this data. So what DataColada did was highlight these suspicious rows in red and then plot them on a graph. As you can see, the highlighted values are the most extreme in the graph, which suggests that these suspicious looking rows were manipulated by the author, aka Francesca Gino, in order to try and prove her hypothesis correct. And the part 3 to this accusation, which I didn't cover much in that first video that I did, was the use of something called CalcChain in Excel. So CalcChain is this feature of Excel which basically keeps a record of the order in which Excel performs its calculations. For example, if there's a cell that adds up the value of 2 other cells, then Excel will need to know what the value of those 2 cells are first before it can perform the action to calculate the value of this 3rd cell. So that's what CalcChain is. And the argument that DataColada made is that when you look into CalcChain, you can see that some data appears to have been moved around, and what they claim is that you can use CalcChain to basically see what the dataset looked like before it was manipulated. Now, this accusation was very convincing. It convinced me, I'm sure it convinced a lot of you who watched my video, or maybe you read about this article somewhere else. It's a very convincing argument. However, Francesca Gino on this website has now given her refutation to these accusations. So we're going to explore those now, but before we do, I just want to say, try and approach these with an open mind. And what that means to me is that we should go into this assuming that Francesca Gino is innocent until the accusations made against her are proven beyond a reasonable doubt. So I ask you to go into this next part of the video with that mindset, innocent until proven beyond reasonable doubt. So the first thing that Francesca Gino refutes is the selection of suspicious rows made by DataColada. She claims that DataColada cherry-picked the data that they flagged as suspicious in order to paint a narrative that seemed worse than it really was. For example, when it came to duplicate IDs, participant number 49 was a duplicate which they flagged as suspicious, but there was actually another duplicate in the dataset, participant ID 13. But for some reason, DataColada didn't include participant ID 13 as also being suspicious. She also claims that 2 of the cells that were flagged as suspicious were actually not suspicious. The first one was on row 69, participant ID 101, and actually I kind of agree with her. This one shouldn't be flagged as suspicious because, well, it follows the ascending order of participant ID. And then she says that row 70 was not out of sequence, but row 73 was out of sequence, but yet wasn't flagged as suspicious. Now, as you can see, the 2 values in those cells are 7 and 5, and really an argument could be made either way as to which one is in sequence and which one is out of sequence. Because basically what we're looking for here are participant IDs that are less than 8. And so with both 5 and 7 being less than 8, one of them has to be in sequence, one of them has to be out of sequence. DataColada said that 7 was out of sequence, Francesca Gino is saying that 5 is out of sequence. So it could really go either way, but if we're going in this with the presumption of innocence, it's actually a very plausible argument. And Francesca Gino also makes the argument that it's a bit weird that DataColada didn't include the control in their analysis, the 3rd condition. After all, when you do a study like this, you're always comparing the manipulated condition to the control. So what Francesca Gino did was basically follow the same procedure as DataColada, highlight the ones that are suspicious according to DataColada's own rules, highlight them in red, and then plot the data along with the control. And when you do that, this is the graph that you get. And as you can see, this graph looks a lot less suspicious than DataColada's graph. Yes, we generally see a trend of, red dots towards the top on this condition and red dots towards the bottom on this condition, but honestly, it's a lot more spread out, right? We have, one high and low in the control condition. Some of these dots are more towards the middle, and when it comes to the sign at the top condition, where most of them are towards the bottom, it kind of makes sense when you look at the data, since most of the dots are generally towards the bottom anyway. So certainly to me, this graph looks a lot less suspicious compared to the one published in DataColada's blog post. But the absolute kicker for me, and the thing that's really making me question whether I was wrong earlier, was this table created by Francesca Gino. So what this table shows is what happens to the results of the study when you exclude the suspicious data according to either DataColada or Francesca Gino. So in this first row, we're looking at what happens when you just include all of the data in the original data set and run the analysis. And of course, that gives you the same result that was published in the paper, p 0.002 and p less than 0.001, suggesting that there's a statistically significant effect in favor of the author's hypothesis. But what's interesting is that if you exclude the suspicious data points that were highlighted by DataColada, you still get a statistically significant result, p 0.028 and p equals 0.002. Remember, in order for a study to be statistically significant, it just has to be less than 0.05, and so all of these are less than 0.05. And the same thing happens when you look at the 10 correctly flagged observations according to Francesca Gino. So that's when Francesca Gino includes the ones that she says that DataColada missed because they were cherry-picking data, and you still get a statistically significant result. And so basically what this table says is that no matter how you cut up the data, excluding suspicious results with DataColada or Francesca Gino's rules or whatever, like no matter how you cut it up, the results of the study still stand. The effect of signing at the top versus the bottom still stands. And so her argument is that, well, if there was no need to manipulate the data in order to prove the result because the result would have been proven anyway, then why would I manipulate the data? And to me, that's a very convincing argument, because it completely removes the incentive for her to want to engage in this type of data manipulation when the study just worked out anyway. Now, the funny thing is that Francesca Gino actually buried this very convincing table in Appendix B of the website. So I went out and found it for you guys because I think it's the most convincing piece of evidence to present to you. But Francesca Gino, if you're watching this video and you want to provide a more compelling case, don't put this table in the appendix, put it in the main article, because this is the most compelling part of the entire website. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I actually find Francesca Gino's arguments surprisingly convincing, and that's not what I expected when I started reading the website. I was expecting to think that she's making up some obviously false excuse, but there's actually pretty hard to find flaws in her logic, especially when you approach it from the point of view that she encourages, which is the presumption of innocence, which is really how we should be treating all suspects in this kind of case. Now, so far, Francesca Gino has only refuted one of the 4 blog posts made by DataColada, but she does say that she will be addressing the other 3 soon. So if you watched that first video of mine before, you'll recall that I said in that video that I have previously recommended to my clients findings made by Francesca Gino's research, and this was really the main one that I was talking about, this idea of signing honesty pledge at the top versus the bottom. And the reason why I recommended it to my clients is because I had seen quite a lot of evidence supporting this idea, not just from Francesca Gino, though this is the most famous study on it, but from other authors too, who have even done their research in a pre-registered way, which of course is one of the ways that we help to mitigate against data fraud. So of the 4 different accusations, I was most skeptical about this first one. We'll see what Francesca Gino has to say about the other 3. But hey, what do you guys think? Are you convinced by Francesca Gino's argument? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Before we go, I just want to say thank you to a guy called Pietro, who's one of my subscribers, who reached out to me via email to tell me about this website. I actually wouldn't have seen this website if not for Pietro's email, because, well, it just wasn't being shared very much by the behavioral science community on Twitter and other places. And so hopefully this video can give Francesca Gino's website a little bit more publicity so people can get a more balanced view of this very complex case. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to check out Ground News in the comments below. I also want to extend an open invitation to either Francesca Gino or the guys at DataColada. If any of you want to come on the channel and talk to me and give your side of the story, I'd be more than happy to listen and maybe make a video about it as well. So that invitation is open to all of you. My email is in the description. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.